these doctors in China, I mean, with forced organ harvesting, they're actually removing organs from people who are alive.
Yeah.
What do they do? Just take the organ and they...
Yeah.
I mean, because these people die, right? They all die.
Yeah. If you would allow that person to survive, he could become a witness.
Oh, of course, they want the witness to die. Welcome to Going Rogue with Lara Logan, the show where we don't mess around, we get right to it. So I want to introduce my guest today is Torsten Trey, a very distinguished gentleman who is also a medical doctor. Our subject, though, is a pretty tough one. It's forced organ harvesting. And Dr. Trey has been working on this issue for a long time now, almost 2 decades. His organization, Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting, has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 3 different times. And what we are hoping to do with this subject is to take our audience from the dark veil of conspiracy and things circulating on the internet, and let's get to the point, right? Let's get to the facts and find out exactly what is true and what is not true from someone who has been dealing with this firsthand for many, many years. So I want to welcome to the show, Dr. Torsten Trey.
Thank you, Lara, for having me. It's actually not a coincidence that I'm here because this is a topic that requires courage, and only someone who is courageous can be the host for such a topic. Thank you.
Well, no doubt we will be censored and we will be suppressed and we'll be somewhat limited in our reach, but it has to be said, right? And so for those people who are wondering about your funny accent, which is funny coming from the girl with the funny accent, right? I know. So, well, you were born and raised in Germany, but you're a citizen and you've been here at least 20 years.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so we'll talk more about your personal involvement in this, how you came to choose what is really for many people a dark subject to be your life's work. But before we do that, there's a distinction between forced organ harvesting and organ trafficking.
That's right.
Can you explain that distinction, please?
Organ trafficking is a phenomenon that we know for many decades. Oftentimes, the people who want to give an organ for money, they agree to it, and it's more like a commercial contract, if you want. But sometimes the people didn't agree to it, and then they fall asleep, and then next morning a kidney is missing. But so sometimes they get money for their organ, usually for their kidney, sometimes not. But the key aspect here is that these people, in most of the cases, they survive. They are missing a kidney, but it's not a murder. In forced organ harvesting, this is exactly the case. It is a killing. It is a murder for organs. Now and then it's on an industrial scale, large scale. So now you would probably ask, how is that possible? And that is exactly going to highlight the difference between organ trafficking and forced organ harvesting. You need to have the government and the police and whatever prosecution behind this apparatus to allow forced organ harvesting to happen.
Why? Why does the state or that infrastructure have to be present?
If, for example, in organ trafficking, you reach numbers in the thousands or tens of thousands, by that time, the operator of this cruelty would be subject to police investigations or so. And that...
I see, because of the bodies, right? Because you're killing people.
Exactly.
And so you can't get away with that forever.
Exactly. You cannot get away for it forever, because if it's...
Wow.
If you talk about transplantation, you need a donor, but also a recipient.
Mm-hmm.
So then the recipient would... what would he do? He would ask somebody to get an organ, and at that point, police could interject and then find this operation, discover this operation. So just because of this concept of donor and recipient, and the organs have to match. So there is a process to see if the organs would actually match. Because of all of this process here, it would not be able to exist in a large scale in a country where the police has the power to enforce the law. But in forced organ harvesting, if you talk about systematically killing, then you have to ask who would be killed. It cannot be somebody from the street. Then you have all the relatives who would go to the police and report, etc. So what happens is if you have people isolated, I'm talking here of prisoners of conscience, political prisoners, dissidents, who are, let's say, unwanted by the government, then the government who is in power can authorize the police to not investigate. So that means that people in
right. So there's no real
camps,
investigation going on.
Right, exactly. So what happens is that prisoners of conscience, they disappear in these detention camps, and it's just with a stroke of a pen, the person doesn't exist anymore, and the police would not investigate.
They're just gone.
It's like a machinery. And that if you think about it, this requires some criteria. Which government would do that? So we found that in the systematic way of operation, it is we only observed it in China, because in China, if whatever the party says, that's the law. So basically, even the president of the Supreme Court, Chinese Supreme Court, the president in 2017, he said that the CCP is technically above the Chinese constitution. So the CCP is writing the law. So if the CCP says that these dissidents don't deserve to live, they can be used for profit and for they can be eradicated, then this is the law. And the whole procedure, starting from the wardens, from the prisons, from the police, to the doctors and nurses, this whole apparatus is working in the sense how the CCP wants them to work. So you have an industrial transplant operation that uses prisoners of conscience on demand for transplantation. Unheard of.
And what kind of scale are we talking about?
It is difficult, as you can imagine, to find accurate data from China. But we have...
Because the CCP is everywhere and there's no transparency.
No transparency, not at all. So,
and even when you do get data, you have no idea if it's real or not.
Basically, nothing is wrong.
Nothing is real.
Nothing is real. So what we did is, there are some cases where we found the official transplant numbers of a hospital. But then we also saw the social media post of one of the leading surgeons. And his numbers were already 10 times larger than the number that the hospital reported. That's just one example. Basically, China knows that this forced organ harvesting is something the world would not accept. So they try everything to hide it. And that includes that numbers have to be secretive or basically manufactured. So what you will see is that China will report annual transplant numbers. Then they say, we had 12,000 kidney transplants this year. But you will never hear that China lists the transplant numbers for each single hospital. So it makes it impossible to verify the numbers. So it's more like a puzzle work and it's
smoke and mirrors
investigations where you have to find the needle in the haystack. And with this approach, we can say that probably per year 30 to 50,000 people are organ harvested.
Why are so many young people struggling to have babies today? Birth rates in the US are at record lows, and that's partly because testosterone levels are dropping all the time. According to some studies, T levels are roughly half of what they were 50 years ago. And if we don't reverse this trend, we could be looking at population collapse. And it's why we partnered with Chalk. They're a Patriot-owned supplement company, and their mission is to save mankind from extinction. They have something called the Male Vitality Stack, and it's been shown in clinical trials to boost your free testosterone by 87% in just 21 days. That is not just a statistic. You will feel it. And ladies, you'll be pleased to know it's not just for men. The female vitality stack addresses just about every complaint a woman can have: stress, mood, hormones, energy, and focus. And it'll even help you keep up with your man. So go to chalk.com and use code LARA for 17.76% off your subscription. Cancel anytime. Or you can also call 50CHOQ3000 and tell them Lara sent you.
30 to 50,000 people are harvested for their organs.
Yeah.
Against their will.
Of course.
In China.
In China.
Every single year.
Yeah.
And these are all Chinese people?
Yeah.
And the buyers of these organs are from all over?
All over the world. So there was a Korean film team in 2017. That film team is really one of my heroes. They went to China with pretending that they need a kidney.
Wow.
For a relative, and they went with a hidden camera. So they went to the Tianjin hospital, and first when they entered the hospital, they saw that the directory listed 3 international wards. So if China officially said, well, they don't have transplant tourists in the country, but the hospital has written on the directory 3 international wards. They have international patients. So then this team went through the process to apply for the transplantation. There was a nurse who spoke Korean. Her job was to basically speak with Korean patients. And they asked, how much is a kidney transplant? She said, 100,000. But if you pay 10,000 extra, you can have it in 2 days.
Wow.
So the regular time is 2 weeks, but with an extra fee, you can get it in 2 days. This is not possible in a transplant program where that is based on altruistic organ donation, because people don't pass away when you need the organ. So the nurse then further said that the Chinese citizens, they pay the lowest price. International,
I see.
The Westerners pay the higher price. But the people from the Middle East, they pay the highest price. So there was a distinction of price categories, levels, that already adjusted to the international demand. And she also said that this Tianjin hospital is a hospital that only does transplantations. And they have international patients. The government knows about it, but the government pretends not to know about it.
Of course.
On camera.
Torsten, wait, I know that, you've dealt with this for so many years that it's very normal to you to sit here and talk about, they do this and they do that. But for many people, this is unimaginable, you know? So maybe we can just lay out exactly what organs are in demand.
Any type of organs. So most of the transplants are kidney transplants, then followed by liver transplant, then heart, lung, skin, corneas, even pancreas. And for example, if you do an islet cell transplant, those are the cells that are inside the pancreas. Mm-hmm. For this islet cell transplant, you actually need 4 pancreas, 4 organs to extract enough islet cells. So if they pursue the islet cell transplant for people who need it, then we can assume that several prisoners of conscience were killed for
at least 4 of them.
Yeah.
Okay, so these cells, what do they do?
They produce insulin, which helps with against diabetes.
I see. So they're in demand.
It's not very often, but I'm just laying out that the number of people who are killed for the organs.
Yes.
Is not only the number that are listed for certain organs, but there can be other procedures. For example, we had one of our advisors. he worked in a company that conducts clinical trials outside of the US. So he was asked to conduct a clinical trial in China, and he refused to do that. And he explained that the clinical trials in China don't follow ethical standards. So what we're talking about is that a clinical trial in the US or for a new pharmaceutical drug, in average takes maybe 10 years to get the approval. In China, it takes 2 years. So how is it possible to bypass the time? How is it possible to make sure that there are no side effects or what the dosage is? I don't have data for this, but my assumption is that in China, they give the drug, they are skipping all the pre-trials and give the drugs directly to the political prisoners, to the prisoners of conscience.
This particular drug?
Any kind of drug. This is the only way how I can imagine that they can reduce the time from 10 years to 2 years. They skip 8 years and give it directly to the prisoners.
Wow. So you're talking about essentially how the medical establishment in China will function.
This is still an assumption. I don't have
hard
data on it, exactly. But just knowing that a clinical trial is shortened from 10 years to 2 years, I was wondering, how is that possible? And I heard from other sources that witnesses said they were somebody came to inject certain substances into their body. They didn't know what. So it was not drawing blood, which would be needed for transplantation, but injecting a substance. My assumption is that these prisoners of conscience are used also as lab animals, if you want.
Lab rats kind of thing, right? They're just tested.
And again,
drugs are tested on them.
In China, there's no ethical system, no ethical thinking. So if the CCP says that these prisoners of conscience, these dissidents, don't have any value for China anymore, but what they still can do is serving as a lab rat, then it can be done, and it would not violate the constitution. So this is something we have not investigated, but somebody should pay attention to it, because when I first heard about the forced organ harvesting in 2006, I thought, wow, I cannot imagine that. That's almost impossible. So it took me 3-4 months to look into it, to get more information about it. And then I also went to a conference myself. I spoke to 2 doctors from China. And at that point, I realized, no, it's true. It's happening. So it started with, this is too cruel to be true. Yeah, and what I'm saying now is that these pharmaceutical clinical trials might also be too cruel to be true, but we should put attention to it. We should think about it.
Yes. Okay, so just for me to understand what we're talking about here, forced organ harvesting is when you basically the person does not survive.
That's correct.
And what kind of organs do they take?
So in most of the cases, it's in 2/3 of the cases it's a kidney that is transplanted, and then in 1/3 of the cases it's the liver, and the other organs have smaller numbers. So
kidney, and then
liver,
and then lungs,
pancreas, lungs, corneas, even skin. What happened in 2020 is when the pandemic broke out. Then in China, there was in I think end of January 2020, there was a report that a lung surgeon decided that they need to perform a lung transplant, an emergency lung transplant on a COVID patient, and they received the organs. The lungs within 24 hours.
Wow.
Unheard of in the US. The shortest time frame that I am aware of is like 16 days, because you not only need to have a matching blood type and tissue factors, but you also need to have the same structure for the rib cage, so that the lung will fit right into it. So it's even more difficult.
Wow.
To find the right lung.
This is exactly what it has to match like that. It has to be the right size to do the lung transplant.
Yeah, and the doctor then said, "Oh, we were lucky. There was a brain dead person in another city, and he was just matching." And that was it. Just some random explanation that somebody just had all the matching data and they could take it.
Okay.
Then
yes.
Then interestingly, right a few days afterwards, there was another hospital that also conducts lung transplant. They started to go into competition with this first doctor, and then they reported they also did lung transplants. And then it went back and forth. And in that month, I think it was February or March 2020, there were at least 8 reported double lung transplantations where the organ, the lung, was found or matched within 2-3 days. So
wow.
This is not only like a single coincidence.
Yes.
But this is like a systematic way to find matching lungs. And why this is so important is to understand that the organs, the kidneys and lungs, are not procured on a regular basis, in a regular sense. They are harvested on demand. And this is what happens in China, because China declared certain groups of people as unwanted, as ostracized. So
undesirables.
Undesirables. That would be a nicer way to say it. Like, so the CCPs, for example, the main group are Falun Gong practitioners. The CCP persecutes Falun Gong since 1999. We observed that the transplant numbers increased starting from 2000 to 2004. They tripled. The transplant numbers tripled after the persecution of Falun Gong has started.
After they were banned in 1999.
After they were banned, exactly. So now what we observe here is almost like a double-sided sword. Who's benefiting from it? Who's profiting? So the medical doctors profit from this process by earning extra money, by earning their numbers for transplantation. They need to have a certain number of transplantation to get their specialty title. And so that's the benefit for the doctors. But for the government, the benefit is different. The government wants to eradicate Falun Gong practitioners. It's almost like what a team where I was co-authoring the article about a cold genocide. We called it a cold genocide.
A cold genocide.
Right now, somewhere in Nigeria, there's a Christian family being persecuted. Those who are not killed are often forced to flee their homes just because they believe in our Savior, Jesus Christ. At Equipping the Persecuted, they're committed to reaching every affected area to find these people and help heal the deep physical and emotional wounds that have been inflicted upon them. But they can't help them without your support. So please visit equippingthepersecuted.org and donate today. Sign up for just $35 a month. It's a little over $1 a day, and you'll help rescue Christians who are suffering and provide security, medical care, food, shelter, and love. The situation is urgent, so I'm asking you to join in the next 10 minutes. And if you do, they'll send you a special thank you gift. If you're wondering if your support will make a difference, I can tell you that it will. And if you've ever thought about helping, this is the time. It's a life of fear and danger for these Christians, but for just over $1 a day, you can change everything. It could be the most important thing you do today. Go online to equippingthepersecuted.org and make a difference in the life of a persecuted Christian. That's www.equippingthepersecuted.org.
Is it accurate to say that there's a massive industrialized
Yes.
business
Yes.
that is going on
Yes.
where people, particularly China in particular,
Yeah.
is trading in
Yes.
human organs?
Yes.
And people from all over the world are going to China to get these organs because it takes too long to get them in their own country.
For example, yes. If they know about it, and if they don't have this moral compass to
Right, they don't have a
reject it,
conscience.
yeah.
Because people know there's a good chance if you're getting your organ in China that someone was forced to give that.
Some may know, some may not know. The problem here is complicity. So if a patient goes to China and thinks he can buy an organ, he is actually triggering the execution of the prisoner. It's on demand.
Yes.
So the patient, the organ recipient, becomes complicit in this nefarious machinery of the CCP. So one part of our work is to warn recipients not to go to China, because you think about it. You go to China, you get a kidney. Afterwards, you learn that somebody was killed for the organ that you carry in your body. That can trigger massive psychological pressure on you, and you walk around with that organ in you. So not only did you commit a crime, I would call it a crime.
You were complicit in a crime.
Because you were complicit in the crime, but it's also like a matter of conscience for the people.
It's a matter of conscience, and for those people, who believe in the spirit, right, or in karma, or in good energy, dark energy. I mean, that would be very dark energy.
Definitely. It leads medicine into an absurd practice. All of us who studied medicine, we learned do no harm. China twisted it and turned it around and said, you can kill to cure a patient.
But what about the person you're killing?
That's where the twist is.
Yes.
So China doesn't have this moral compass or ethical understanding that this is not possible. And this is a very important point. China does not abide by ethical standards. It is replaced by the one-party voice of the CCP, and now project this on the world trade, on international treaties, on any interaction with China. We believe the partner has the same, the business partner has the same ethical understanding, but it's wrong. You are wrong. You will be cheated. In any case, if you ask Western companies who invest in China, they have to give up all the information about the product shared with China. This is unheard of. Would you think that a company in the US would handle in the information? Not a chance.
Not a chance. And in China, any business person can tell you want to have your business there, you have to agree to have the CCP has their spies.
Exactly.
You're going to give up your intellectual property, your trade secrets, whatever it is. If you go to China thinking that you can hold on to any of that, you're just a lunatic, right?
Yes.
Or you have no brain. Everyone who does business in China knows that that's the price.
It's kind of unimaginable, because here we would say, we call it corporate spying, corporate
espionage or whatever it is. Yes, trade secrets.
But if the same company goes to China, it is like a self-opening.
It's part of doing business.
Yeah, you hand it over for free.
So, it's crazy.
So on one point you have espionage, on the other one you give it as a gift.
Yes.
So you can understand, and just from this example, how China has twisted or is twisting our moral compass and our ethical standards in all aspects of society.
Yes, because
it's twisting it.
Yeah, for example, you're not supposed to have child labor, and so the fact that there are children working in the factories in China, we just ignore that. We say, oh, we do, we're good people. We don't put children to work in the United States. We don't turn them into slaves.
Yeah.
Oh, but you're buying your goods from a country that's making them with child slaves, or that you have the working conditions. You're supposed to meet certain standards and workers have certain rights. The fact that none of that exists in China doesn't matter.
Yes. We have a heated discussion about slavery work in the past, but we are buying products that are from China that are built on forced labor and labor camps, which is slavery.
Yes.
So you see the hypocrisy here that on one point we have high standards against slavery, and on the other side we agree to it. And this is how China operates also with media. For example, this topic, forced organ harvesting, we want to talk about it from the very beginning, but the Western media is silencing it. How is it possible? It's self-censorship. China cannot censor media abroad, but it can entice media in the West to do self-censorship.
Of course.
So they agree not to report it. What it means is the Western media is sacrificing its strongest part, and that is reporting the truth. And that's how you see here. China messed up the international transplant field. They also messed up the media field. They also messed up the corporate business field. So whenever you touch on communist China, on the CCP, you are the one who's losing. And we see this also now, especially in the transplant field. When we started, we wanted to help those victims in China. Now it is actually that China's influence has reached our shores. So what it means is that organizations, American transplant organizations, are not following through with the ethical standards that they appreciate so much. Last year, in 2024, there was an American Transplant Congress in Philadelphia. We applied for this conference, which we did in the past. We in the exhibition hall, we had a little exhibition booth table to inform doctors. But then we didn't hear from them about our application for 2 months. We followed up, and then they asked. They said, we decided to take a different direction. That was the official explanation. We decided to take a different direction. And they rejected our booth. Not only our group, but a second group too. Wow. So it's not only about us, it's a systematic rejection of organizations who want to bring the information about forced organ harvesting to the American doctors.
Because you want American doctors and hospitals to know that the organs that they may be getting could be coming from forced organ harvesting.
We want transplant doctors in America to know that we want them to know that if they do medical exchange programs with Chinese transplant centers, that they actually giving information to perpetrators. We want doctors to know what is happening in China and want to discourage them that they don't send their patients to China, because then their patients would become complicit in this crime. And we also want to inform doctors in the West so that they understand it and take action as a medical community on this. So what happened is the leadership, not the doctors, the leadership didn't allow us to be in that conference. Then we continued. We actually contacted senators and congressmen. And somehow after another 2 months, they contacted us again and said, okay, send us your material that you want to lay out on the table in the exhibition hall. And only the information that we would send them to the leadership there would be allowed to be on the table. So if we send the material and then later
you want to add something or change something,
we would add an information, a flyer or whatever. They would take this as a reason to kick us out.
Wow.
What is happening is they were fishing for our information. You know, this very complex. I've never heard that. I never heard this is censorship. I've never heard that a pharma company or whatever have to show in advance all material to the organizer, unless they cannot have that booth. So anyhow, we send our material, and a week later, we stay with our decision. We reject your booth.
They stuck with the original decision.
Yes.
They were like, not a chance. We're not putting this out. That's so interesting because, you see that hidden hand. One of the things that I've looked at very closely is information warfare. And COVID was a very good example because you saw these articles start to creep into medical journals and into the media, before the pandemic hit. And this was basically a shaping operation, right? Shaping the information battlefield so that people would receive the catastrophic information about the so-called pandemic in the way that they want. So it's softening up of attitudes, it's a softening up of people's understanding, and it's preparing the information environment for whatever this information weapon system is that you want to now introduce. And so that's kind of like what seems to have happened here, is that China has gotten involved in something that you were used to participating in, and now suddenly there's a system of control being applied that's very un-American, by the way, that's counter to the Constitution in many respects, and that you've never encountered before, which indicates that something has changed. And so what is changed is that, according to your research, is that more and more American transplant hospitals and doctors and organizations are receiving organs from China.
I'm not sure if they send organs to transplant hospitals here in the US. However, there are inventions that were working to the point to preserve organs for a longer time, for a longer transportation.
From China, to get them from China to the US?
Maybe not yet, because there are some issues for China where they don't want to, where they want to continue to hide the source of their organs. They cannot explain how they produce or have so many organs for transplantation. So they cannot open up yet.
Because the obvious question is, how did all these people die?
But I think they are preparing for it.
Interesting. And then you also have the issue of the southern border, right? Because there's been a lot of people coming over the border who we know from the evidence, they leave, I've seen it with my own eyes, they leave all their IDs on the banks of the rivers, and they come into the country. I mean, basically you could say you're Jackie Chan 400,000 times and nobody would know the difference. And they're not calling the U.S. embassy or the Chinese embassy in the U.S. and saying, hey, do you know this person? Can you send us their file, right? There's no background checks. There's no identity verification. So people coming over the border can say they are whoever they want. They can just make it up. New identity.
Yeah, this is a very interesting phenomenon. For many years, we isolated China on this practice, and China had a hard time to defend itself. So then China came up with this idea, we need to find other areas, other countries who do the same. Then China has started interaction or commercial back and forth with cartels in Mexico, and they delivered fentanyl precursors.
That's right.
So it becomes a business where both sides became like involved in it.
Yes, with fentanyl, they learned how to make it from having their spies in the pharmaceutical companies American and Western pharmaceutical companies in China, they started sending the drug to the US.
Exactly.
And then they made a deal with the cartels. We'll teach you how to make it.
Yes.
You have the infrastructure,
Exactly.
you have the placement and
Exactly.
access. So
Exactly.
you proliferate it, because that's what the Chinese wanted with
Yeah.
drug warfare. And we'll supply you with the precursor chemicals and the
Exactly.
dyes and the
Yes.
pill presses and, whatever it is that you happen to need.
Yeah.
So they work together,
Yes.
right?
And what is happening is the method is China is trying to find proxies
Yes.
that do their work remotely, so that nobody can point out China. It's the Mexican cartels.
Of course.
So now,
And then
China,
the conversation ends. It's the cartels. No one looks any further.
So after this fentanyl business came along, then China also started to persuade the cartels that they can also do forced organ harvesting. And that's how this aspect of forced organ harvesting is now also setting foot in Mexico.
So how do you know that that's what happened? What do you base that on?
I watched a documentary from a journalist. I don't have the name right now. She followed that trail and went deeper and deeper to the Mexican cartel workers, and they, at one point, she was actually told that the person just took out the organs. And but this is maybe not only happening in Mexico, but then also when as you asked at the beginning, the people who cross the border. So here's another phenomenon. In China, they take organs from Falun Gong practitioners.
But you have to explain, what is Falun Gong?
It's a spiritual discipline in the Buddhist way of cultivating or a religion, and if you want.
So this is basically, for people who don't know, a religious sect in China. Some people call it a cult, or the Chinese call it a cult.
Yeah. That
The CCP does anyway.
Yeah, this is misinformation from the CCP. They want to frame this practice as a sect or cult. There are no criteria to substantiate that. For Falun Gong, you can read a book, you can access the exercise on the internet, or find a place where you can learn. There's no membership. And you also cannot pay money to some entity, because there's no membership and no group. It's a free access to this practice, and everyone for himself or herself can decide to cultivate in Falun Gong.
Would you consider it a religion?
There's an overlap to a religion. It is a cultivation to improve, to follow truthfulness, compassion, forbearance. And the more you advance, you probably reach like what is close to religion. But it is a religion that is based on these principles to become a good person.
Is it a kind of group? Is it an organization in any sense?
In a way, there's like a loose organization where people say, okay, I set up a website, or I do the exercises in the park for people who come. It's more like people volunteer to do certain parts, what they can do.
So it's a shared belief system.
Yes, you can say so, yeah.
And it has elements of it has spiritual elements.
Yes.
It has cultural elements.
Yes.
And it's sort of built around, what are the ideas that it's built around? In
a very simple sense, the tenets, the principles that practitioners of Falun Gong follow in their lives, that they try to practice in their lives in interaction with people, is truthfulness, to be honest, to say and speak the truth. Truthfulness, compassion, to be compassionate and benevolent with people around you, and to be tolerant and forbearing with or forgiving with other people. So in a way, you practice this.
Right.
You're not believing in these three principles. You are practicing.
It's a way of life.
It's a way of life. You can say so. Yeah.
But do you live in collective environments?
No. You just live your life as usual. We have your job, your family. You live in the countryside or in the town, whatever. You are just taking part in the society and practice these principles in society. If you go into a desert, how can you practice compassion if there's nobody around, right? So it's basically you live with other people. The interesting part is look at the CCP. The CCP is based on lies. It has a propaganda machinery. Everything is twisted to make the CCP look good.
Yeah, that's for sure. They're very good at that.
Lies. Then the CCP is brutal, as we have seen from the student massacre. It's based on revolution, on killing.
Well, and as we saw during COVID, when they were dragging people out of their homes and
it's brutal,
locking them up and
brutal. And then, as a one-party state, they are not able to tolerate a second opinion. It's just absolutely impossible. What the CCP says, it's the law. There's no room to tolerate. So now, if you think of what Falun Gong is, Falun Gong talks about truthfulness, is opposite to the lies. Falun Gong talks about compassion, is opposite to the brutality. Falun Gong is aiming to, or practicing to be tolerant, is opposite to a one-party intolerance. So that's why the CCP has declared Falun Gong to be outlawed, ostracized, because Falun Gong, by just being what it is exposing
it's a threat.
What the CCP is actually doing.
So let me ask you just a couple questions, so that people can really understand what Falun Gong is. Are there any sort of traditions or ceremonies or rituals that you carry out as part of Falun Gong?
No, you have the three principles, and then you practice 5 exercises, like a Qigong style exercises, is like Tai Chi or something like that.
Right. So
which is
partly breathing, partly stretching.
Not so much breathing, but that comes natural. But stretching and some is like 5 different exercises, including meditation exercise. So it is something where the body is recharging, if you want. And
sure.
Yeah.
And does God have any role in this?
That's a good question. There is this concept of something divine that we cannot see, but it's not in the sense that there's like a single God. Rather, there are beings on the level of gods and Buddhas and so on.
But can humans be on the level of God?
That's another tough question. I would think that they can. There are like different levels of godly divine beings, and according to how you cultivate, you are on. You might be on this level or that level or this level. So when I in my youth looked into Christianity and was reading in the New Testament, I was noticing that Jesus did not ask people just to simply believe and relax.
Yes.
But he actually asked to follow him. So if you get a hit on one cheek, hold in the
yes.
You do something.
So works-based faith.
So it is like an active process of becoming a better person. It's not just done by just sitting back and I believe in Jesus. That's not what he taught when he was walking the earth. He was asking people to follow his footsteps. So there is this there's this aspect where he asked people to become better.
Yes.
And that's, in a way, if you want, that's the part where Falun Gong says cultivating truthfulness, compassion, forbearance. You see, for example, Jesus wanted the people to be compassionate. Falun Gong is doing the same, is asking the people to be, or the practitioners of Falun Gong, to be compassionate. So it's an active process of cultivating.
I see. Almost like missionaries.
Maybe. I can. It's difficult to put into words.
Yes, I understand. Okay, my last question about Falun Gong. So I have it then in my head. Is there a leader?
There's a teacher who came, who has written books and other texts to advise or instruct practitioners of Falun Gong what they can do in certain situations.
And does that teacher have to be worshipped or? I mean, recognized, obviously.
It's not part of the practice that he is being worshipped.
Right.
So, in his own words, he said, "Don't worship me. Take the book that he has written. Take the book as something to worship. The book as a way similar, maybe to the Bible. The book that instruct the people.
It's like the instruction manual, except with the Bible, of course, it's supposed to be the Word of God that instructs you. And is he treated like a god or no?
I think in some way, yes. But this is not part of it. You know that there's always this thinking to squeeze concepts onto other examples.
I understand.
And then if you do that, then you're not hitting the truth.
I see.
So he himself said, "Don't treat me like a person
like a god.
to worship."
Yeah.
You know, he's basically saying, "I want the people who cultivate, to cultivate according to the book." So he says, "Take the book to worship, not me."
I see. But it's not really worshiping in the sense that people worship God.
No. For example, if you think of worshiping, let's say you take a Indian guru, then you see that people are traveling to the town and worship the guru at the ashram.
Yes.
There's no such thing in Falun Gong. So the founder, the instructor or the
There's
teacher.
There's no temples to the teacher.
He basically lives mostly alive in retreat.
I see. Interesting. Okay, so how many Falun Gong do you think there are in China?
Well, in 1999, the government has estimated that 70 to 100 million people practice Falun Gong.
Wow. Out of a population of how many, though, in China?
About, at that time, 1.3 billion. That was about like 8% of the population.
And I mean, you don't have more up-to-date figures. It must be difficult to get those kind of figures anyway.
And now it's difficult.
Yeah.
Because now you could at that time you could estimate those numbers because people were practicing publicly in parks, and then you could say in this town there are 10,000 people on this square practicing there. 10,000 here, 10,000 there, 10,000. So it was so. What happened is in the Chinese population, Tai Chi and Qigong was very popular before Falun Gong. So people were already used to that practice. But when Falun Gong started to be introduced in the public in 1992, people tried it. The same people tried it.
Yeah.
And they found that this is much better.
I see.
So they already had an understanding of Qigong and Tai Chi. But when they started to practice Falun Gong, immediately they said, "Wow, let's switch to Falun Gong. That's much better." And that's why within 7 years, from 1992 to 1999, within 7 years, you got 70 to 100 million people because they immediately switched. It's not like you find new people to practice this practice, but the people were already prepared or familiar with Qigong and Tai Chi, and that's why
I see. So it laid the ground for that. So all of this to say that Falun Gong is a major threat to the Chinese Communist Party, which, like all true Marxists, denies the existence of God and sees faith as problematic, right? I mean, and to be outlawed. So they don't want people believing in anything.
No, it's absolutely impossible, because if you believe in a god in China, in communist China, or anything similar, it would violate the one-party status. It would immediately create this field. Who's right, the CCP or that god? The CCP or that...
And the CCP has to always be right.
And the CCP, they are threatened, they are scared. If there's another person who has so much influence on people, and they would say, well, if they listen to that person, they don't listen to us. It's about power and control. And when the CCP understood this, it's actually not a threat, because Falun Gong does not aspire any political...
has no political aspirations.
Doesn't have political aspirations.
They're not looking to overthrow the government.
No, not at all. They just want to have the freedom to do what they do.
And essentially the beliefs are very much peaceful.
Of course.
Yeah. So, okay, you have this massive growth in China for the Falun Gong right up until 1999 when the CCP decides to ban them.
Yes.
And then what happens?
Then it's not only banned, they started a brutal persecution. So people were tortured to death, they were forced into labor camps, brainwashing, anything. They actually, the president at that time, Jiang Zemin, he started a so-called 610 office. You know, that think of in Nazi Germany like an SS office. The 610 office that was founded on June 10th, that's why the name is 610 office, had only one purpose, to crash and persecute Falun Gong.
Wow.
That was the only person. They went into the companies, into the factories, and told the boss to remove practitioners of Falun Gong. They went they raided their houses, their homes. They only had this one task. Like for the SS, it was the Jewish people. The 610 office had the one task to go after Falun Gong practitioners, not criminals, Falun Gong practitioners. So it was right from the beginning. It was and that's where also the genocidal aspect comes in. The intention was to crack down, to eradicate Falun Gong.
You think that the intention of the CCP,
yes,
post in the 1999, was to completely erase Falun Gong?
There is a quote from the former president or chairman, Jiang Zemin. He said, if we would not be able to crash Falun Gong within 3 months, that would be a joke. And he also said, bankrupt them financially.
Yes.
Destroy their reputation and destroy them physically.
Yes.
So this aspect, destroy them physically, that is where equal to killing people. And that is where it ends up to become forced organ harvesting. So it goes back to the chairman where he announced he want to eradicate Falun Gong by physically destroying them, forced organ harvesting. So
let me find these figures here, because this is a pretty shocking statistic, and I think it helps people understand. When China banned Falun Gong in 1999, there was a dramatic increase right after that in the number of organ transplants.
Yes.
Let's look at what happened then with the CCP, because Falun Gong was banned in
1999.
1999, that's right. And the following year, in 2000, from 2000 to 2004, there was a 250% increase.
That's right.
In transplants in China.
Yes.
And over the same period of time, in other parts of the world, the increase was like 10 to 15%.
Yeah, so in all other countries that have organ donation programs and are based on altruistic organ donation, the increase in organ donations is basically 2-3% per year. So over 4 or 5 years, it's an increase of 15%.
Yeah, and that kind of makes sense, that's organs that come from a car accident or somebody dying, people saying, I want to donate my organs.
It's based on the information that come out where the government or the medical profession informs patients that we need more organ donors so that we can have more transplants. This way, there were more people who were coming forth, so the numbers of transplantations also increased. It's a very slow, gradual increase. And you also need to train doctors who can actually perform the transplantation. So you need to wait until there are more doctors who can do that. But in China, and those are only the official numbers. The official number was that the transplants went from 4,000 to over 12,000.
Over what period?
Over 4 years, from 2000 to 2004.
Wow.
But those are the official numbers. I personally have seen an article from a Chinese newspaper that stated in 2004 they did 20,000 transplants.
So that means 20,000 dead people at a minimum.
Usually you say one person yields like about 3 organs. So if you have 20,000 transplants, then you are talking about 6,000 people who donated organs.
Generally speaking,
Yeah.
When you see those kind of numbers, you're thinking about 3 organs per
Donor.
person.
Yeah.
And that brings you, so when you see those numbers, it brings you down to that many people.
Yeah.
This is just, it's very, very interesting because you have this dichotomy where on one hand, people know that organ transplants are normal. They know that it can be difficult and there's a long wait. But then when you say, well, some of those organs, because you don't know where your organ is coming from, do you?
No.
So you have no idea and you're trusting the hospital
Yes.
and the doctor.
Yeah.
And they have no idea.
They should know it, but with under forced organ harvesting, everything has changed. So there is a layer of disinformation about this. You don't ask questions. You just say, I need a kidney, and you get a kidney.
I see. Okay, so you have the Falun Gong in China who are an obvious threat to the CCP. And after they ban them, there's this dramatic increase in the number of organ transplants that are officially recognized in China. And what is happening to the Falun Gong? How are they getting all of those organs to meet that incredible demand?
So when Falun Gong practitioners are detained by raids or through other ways, they are in certain cells or camps, and then there's a systematic way to draw their blood and possibly do other examinations like ultrasound or x-rays, but mostly blood. And what we learned is that regular prisoners, criminals, they are not subject to this blood drawing. It's only done on Falun Gong practitioners.
Wow.
So there's a selection process.
Okay, let me understand that properly. So when people come into a prison in China, ordinary criminals are not subject to a blood draw.
No.
But Falun Gong prisoners,
Yes.
they take your blood.
Yes. You have to just from the financial perspective, drawing blood and sending it to the laboratory, you have to pay money for that. Mm-hmm. So if you would, why would you do it on people that are criminal, that are subject to forced labor or tortured? Why would you have a medical health exam on them? That doesn't make sense.
Especially if you're not sick.
Yeah, exactly.
And this happens to them when they arrive in the prison?
Yes. So then the blood type and tissue factors are collected in a data bank. So these camps have large data banks of 10,000, 20,000 people with all the information from the blood drawing. So why would a detention camp with so many blood tests spend thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars for the examination of the blood in the laboratories if there wouldn't be a return for the investment?
Well, especially in China, right? I mean,
Exactly.
because they don't do that anywhere in the world. But in China, when they build, laboratories. They're not building them to save the Chinese people from diseases. I mean, China is not known for sending out life-saving treatments all over the world, right? I mean, China is known rather for not caring very much about its people.
Yes.
And not doing much to save them.
Yes. And the return on the investment comes when if there's a recipient who needs an organ
and is willing to pay a lot of money.
Then this blood drawing is basically.
So they're drawing the blood of Falun Gong prisoners on arrival in prison, as a form of figuring out who's got what you need.
I interviewed one practitioner who escaped from China. That was, I think, 2017. I interviewed him. He told me that he was arrested because he distributed flyers. He was arrested and then immediately same day taken to the hospital. There was a police officer. And then they wanted to draw his blood, and he said, "No, I don't want you to draw my blood." And then the police, and then he said, I know why you want to draw my blood. You want to draw my blood because you want to take my organs." And then the police officer said, "That's right. This is exactly what we want to do."
So blatant.
And then, but this Falun Gong practitioner had contacts with other high levels, etc. And then at the end, he was able to escape or leave the country. But he told me that directly. Another practitioner told me another story. The practitioner was from Taiwan, visiting her mother in mainland China. And while she was in a hospital, the mother. And then while waiting, she wanted to take music lesson. I don't know why, but she wanted to take music lesson, and she took it from a student. And the student asked her, "Did you hear of forced organ harvesting?" She said, and yeah. But it's hard to believe. And then the student said, "But it's true. The father of my friend is overseeing this in this hospital across the street." That's what this practitioner told me. Then another one was, she was sitting in a cafeteria and overheard a conversation of doctors, because she was visiting her mother in the hospital, a conversation of doctors at a table, dining table. And then one of those doctors were had a breakdown, was crying, and said, I was trained to save people's lives, but all what I'm doing is killing people. So that is another original quote.
But did they know specifically that they were talking about organ harvesting?
Yes. There are doctors who in the operating room who inject a substance, possibly potassium, to cause a heart arrest, basically like a heart attack.
To stop the heart.
To stop the heart, and then they take the organs.
Because the organs, it's important to get them while the patient's alive, right?
The fresher the organs, the better they react in the new body. That is commonly known. So we are fighting here maybe for a half-hour time window.
Wow.
In China, it's just a matter of a minute.
What do you mean?
The doctors become the executioners. They kill the person, take their organs out very, not following any
real medical procedure,
surgical procedures.
Right.
Just go into it and take the organs and bring it over to the neighboring operating room.
Oh, it's that close.
Yes. So in one case, another person that I interviewed, he was a practitioner. He was taken to a ward, and that ward was completely empty. Nobody was in that. No patient was on that ward. He was taken into a room, and then he overheard that. A doctor was saying, "This one we operate tonight, 6 p.m. or so." And then he got a gown and was on a bed, and he was pushed onto the operating room with his gown. But then the doctor said, "Abort." What happened? So there were a lot of people, international people and locals who raised the alarm, who said, "My husband is here in that hospital. I want to see my husband. I want to see. So at that time, they were afraid because there were too many witnesses.
I see.
So they had to.
They were
abort it.
exposed.
So that gives you an aspect why Falun Gong displays the core. One of the reasons why Falun Gong practitioners are so easily targeted. Falun Gong practitioners, because of their compassion, don't want to tell their identity to protect their family members. Because if the CCP knows who the family is, they also go after the parents and the kids and whatnot. So they don't reveal their identity. No name. They become a number prisoner. They get a number. And that number is in that data bank. So what it means is that a person without name, without relatives, just a number, can disappear at moment's notice. And there's no problem that he disappears because he actually doesn't exist
anymore. Wow.
So it's a machinery that was perfected over the years, where they exploit, in a way, the compassion of Falun Gong practitioners and make them actually even more vulnerable to become an organ source.
And this is a dual purpose, right? On the one hand, it helps the CCP get rid of the Falun Gong because they consider them a threat.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, they get to make money.
Yeah, the doctors make money. The government gets the genocide against Falun Gong. Basically, they repeat the student massacre from 1989, but they learned their lesson. They cannot do it in public. So they do it slowly.
You mean the Tiananmen Square massacre?
Student massacre,
right,
where they
the
shot
famous picture happened of the students standing in front of the tank.
The tank man and 3,000 students were killed. So that happened in 1989 in June 4th. And the whole world saw that. So the CCP knows we cannot repeat that. We cannot
the Chinese
do that
don't
again.
like that, do they? They don't like to be embarrassed. They want to save face.
Yes. But not only they want to keep face, they know forced organ harvesting is so barbaric. If the world would learn about it, they would retract from the Chinese economy. They say, we don't want to invest in this country. You stop it. We come back.
Well, you hope. You hope that's what the world would do.
But this is what happened after the student massacre. So at that point...
They were shamed.
Globally. They were ashamed, but even now, China would not be able to control the international community. Half of the international community, at least, I would say, would say, we get out of China. It would, China would collapse.
If they had to admit to that.
China would collapse. So they know under no circumstances can this be made
exposed.
So that's why they keep low profile and execute the practitioner, eradicate the Falun Gong practitioners all over the country, just one at a time for a good purpose.
So you believe it's a genocide?
It's a genocide.
Slow one, though.
It's what is called a cold genocide, a slow genocide, a slow eradication where probably since 1999, probably more than 1 million Falun Gong practitioners were killed.
Wow, that's a lot.
That's a lot, and people don't hear about it.
No, they don't.
Because China's self-censorship trick is working.
And also, even if they do hear about it, number one, it sounds so crazy that they say, oh, that can't possibly be true.
Yes.
And then number two, they're like, oh, that's that cult, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
and so they dismiss it, which is exactly what China wants.
Exactly. China wants that. However, think about it. Even... although they are not a cult or sect or whatever, even if they were a cult or sect, would they deserve to become subjected to forced organ harvesting? No human being should be subjected to that. So China has completely twisted our moral compass, our ethical understanding. And as I mentioned earlier with the American Transplant Congress, they rather don't talk about it. They actually take away knowledge from those 4,000 doctors.
They actively censor and deceive.
That's right. They censor and cause a deception. And what is so? If the leadership decides that, that's okay. But what about those 4,000 doctors who would love to hear from us.
To have the opportunity to make up their own mind.
Exactly. They are the leadership takes that freedom away. The transplant leadership treats educated doctors, smart doctors like kids.
Yes.
You are not able to make up your own
Sounds familiar. Sounds a lot like they do with the COVID vaccine.
And this is very...
or with different treatments like ivermectin. You don't know. You're the doctor on the front line treating everybody, but you don't know what you're doing.
It's very
You know what I
concerning.
would like to do, Torsten? I would like to see their bank accounts. See how many of them are on the payroll of the CCP.
Interesting question.
Yeah, because you know why I raise it? Because there's a group of cyber intelligence people that I talk to from time to time, and one of the things that they've worked on for a very long time is China. And they say, oh yeah, they have a list of all the people on their payroll, and of course they won't give it to me. I've been trying, but when I ask them about it, they just say, "You'll be stunned." They said, "You'll never believe who's on it," and it's long. It's a long, long list. So why would you not? I mean, if you're China, and if this is how you're getting rid of your political opponents, and it's also how you're bringing in money to run your operations, then why wouldn't you do everything you can to make sure that it doesn't get out? Or even if it does, that it's so discredited at that point that it doesn't matter, it doesn't move the needle.
Well, China, the CCP stands for lies. Truth doesn't need support.
No.
Truth is just speaks truth for itself. Truth is truth. But for lies, you need to maintain it.
Yeah, my mother used to say a lie has no legs.
Yes.
So you have to keep, if you want to keep it up, you got to keep telling more lies.
So basically, lies lead to bribery. So, and China is, the Chinese society is very much soaked into bribery. I was told that if you go to an emergency room, they tell you have to wait 8 hours. But if you pay a little money, then it just takes 20 minutes.
Wow. Well, strangely enough, I just was in Panama in the Darien Gap, where, which has been used as a major invasion route to the U.S. And there are two roads. We hear a lot about the road that most people take, the poor people, where a lot of people die and struggle along the way. But guess what? There's another route. It's like the VIP route. And that's where most of the Chinese come. And that one is much, much easier. And of course, how do you get access to that money? You pay. And there's even commercials, I've seen some of them, for Chinese people, which are kind of advertising this trip as the great adventure. Of course, it's not a great adventure for the many, many, many people coming through the tough road in the jungle, where they're, where you have like skulls of people lying in the ground, or people emerging from the jungle holding their dead children, or tales of survivors, who've been abandoned because they can't walk anymore, who are getting scraps of food from people going by and just waiting to die. I mean, horrific stories compared to these commercials where they're advertising this adventurous trip, by boat, by plane, by road, by rail, by water, whatever, and it's like, wow, it's incredible what you can do when you have money, not just money behind you. There's a hidden hand, right? I mean, you can tell.
Yeah, it requires logistics.
Definitely.
Not only money, but there's
and time.
There's an infrastructure for Chinese military-aged men to cross the border. They arrive in 10 cities, and then they have buses, and they bring them, and it's just going every day.
So let me ask you this, Torsten. What is it possible to even assess what this industry is worth?
In the billions.
And what do you base that on?
If you take 20,000 transplants and tag a price of 100,000 for a kidney to it, you get into the billions.
Okay, and you're getting these numbers of transplants from official Chinese government numbers, right?
Not so much official, because they don't want to
Acknowledge it.
But from people who went through the process, who some of them found information on social media of some of the Chinese doctors.
I see, telling you what they charge.
Yes,
I see.
And then there was this Korean film team that has it on a film camera, the price tag. So, but again, it's not about the money. It's that is just the money aspect is just from the CCP to create a self-propelling mechanism, because now the doctors are interested in the salary and they earn much more than a regular doctor.
I see. That's how you get the doctors involved.
Yeah, they can make they earn with 1 or 2 transplant operations. They earn as much as other doctors earn over the whole year.
Yes, and once they're complicit, now you've bought their silence.
Exactly. Yeah, who would say, "Hey, I did that"?
Yeah, who would say, "I did that"?
But then they're also kept in certain camps, often like military hospitals, so they cannot so easily escape. It's a very tricky machine. But the money keeps them, makes them to continue. It's a self-propelling mechanism. That's what the CCP wants, because that's like a machine that runs endlessly and helps them to eradicate Falun Gong. So the CCP government does not need to think about how do we eradicate Falun Gong. They don't need to do that anymore, because the machine is running on its own.
Wow. Do you have any sense, of how much this has impacted the Falun Gong community?
Oh, I mean, if you think of the practitioners in China,
yeah,
who would not say this is scary? Terrifying.
Yeah.
So, of course, it has, and this is an intention, the government wants to create something so terrifying that people give up the practice.
It's like self-censorship. If you know that it's going to cost you it's my job, right, my reputation, and so on and so on, then why am I going to talk about it?
No. It's a self-censorship in their belief system. So they say, basically, you can choose. Either you die through forced organ harvesting, or you spiritually die by giving up your belief.
Wow.
So basically, Falun Gong practitioners in China are on the edge of one or the other. And this is what the CCP is pursuing. They want that Falun Gong disappears from China, either through killing or forcing practitioners into self-censorship.
Or to make another choice.
To basically stop practicing Falun Gong.
Wow, that's very dark.
So it's very dark, very sophisticated.
Yes, very sinister.
And more than 10 years ago, I already said to friends and colleagues, if China is willing to kill their own people for the organs, what do you think would they do with non-Chinese?
Oh, yeah.
So when Covert came from China, from Wuhan,
yes,
I was not surprised. I was saying, this is what they do. China has no problem to kill everyone who is not with the CCP. We cannot understand that. We are thinking of we negotiate with the CCP. There's no negotiation. The CCP, basically, Xi Jinping says there's a fight between China, the CCP, and the US. And at the end, one will be defeated. He knows that. He said it. So in the mind.
And Xi Jinping is the leader of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yes, exactly. And most of the time we make a mistake if we say, okay, you know what, Xi Jinping, I like that person. He's actually pretty smart and pretty nice. I think I can negotiate with him. That is a misunderstanding, terrible misunderstanding, because he's just a puppet. He's just a figurehead. But behind it, you have the Politburo. You have the entire system of communism.
Of course. You have the deep state.
Yeah, in a way. You have the communist system, and that would not allow whatever you negotiate with Xi Jinping to happen.
To really happen.
So
you can go through the whole process of negotiation.
Yes.
You can come up with an agreement, and that machinery behind it in the shadows will never, ever let it happen.
No. For example, in the transplant community here, there's a belief like we train doctors from China here in the US so that we can teach them ethics. Okay, great. And then they go back to China, and they say, "Hey, I was in the US. I learned about ethics."
Okay,
and then all the colleagues, the whole system, it says, "What are you talking? We are just doing what the CCP is saying."
Yeah, and
because there's no tolerance. It's only what the CCP. The CCP is the ethical system.
They decide.
And
on everything.
Within a week, that doctor who learned about ethics will throw away everything he learned.
Yeah.
So the hope that we can train doctors about ethics, as long as the communist system in China reigns, there's no such thing.
It's not grounded in reality.
No.
And let me ask you something. These doctors in China, I mean, with forced organ harvesting, they're actually removing organs from people who are alive.
Yeah.
And not bothering to, I mean, what do they do? Just take the organ and I mean, because these people die, right? They all die.
Yeah.
With forced organ harvesting, there's no life after the surgery.
No.
So they just take what they need and let them bleed out?
Yes. So what happened is, if you would allow that person to survive, he could become a witness.
Oh, of course, they want the witness to die.
So he has to be removed. Otherwise, it would be too dangerous. That one of
especially
them
with so many.
So then what happens is, oftentimes they also take the organs in hospitals that have like a department that works with biohazards.
Yes.
And they have an incinerator in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
And then they basically burn the cadaver.
The bodies.
The bodies in the incinerator.
That's why no one finds them.
Yes, no traces. So it's
no trace left behind.
Yeah. So it's a very one of the organizations that work on this issue actually received a recording of the person who was actually still alive, but in the basement, and it was a doctor who recorded the last words with a cell phone.
Really?
Yeah, and that organization has that video.
This was in China?
Yeah.
Was it inside a detention facility?
No, that was a regular hospital. Oh. They took the victim to the hospital to remove the organs, and then they took the cadaver, the body,
to be
to
burned.
the basement to be
burned. And the doctor in the basement found that the person was still alive.
Yeah,
and recorded the last words.
And I don't know if it was a doctor or like an assistant, but he filmed it or so.
And why did he film it?
I guess he was just shocked. Moved, or I don't know.
And do you have that recording?
I don't have it, but there's another organization that says it has that recording.
Do you think they would share it with us if we asked?
Maybe.
Maybe. It would be dangerous for them.
No, maybe they want to prepare it for, or keep it for another documentary or so.
We'd have to find out.
Yeah.
And what did the person say? Do you know what the last words were?
I don't remember exactly, but something like "help me" or something like that.
I mean, that's just evil. To do that to another human being, completely wicked.
To release a virus that is so potent, like the COVID virus.
Yeah.
And knowing that it is contagious, and in January 2020, but telling the Italian foreign minister or the Secretary of State that this is not contagious and we don't need to restrict international flights.
Yeah,
in January, that is sinister too. is just a different layer. Millions of people died because of that virus, and they wanted to spread it.
Well, they also didn't want anybody to be cured because at least in the U.S., they to get an emergency use authorization to fast track a vaccine, by law, there cannot be a treatment available. And ivermectin was the treatment that was available, especially when combined with vitamin D and zinc and all that. I mean, there's so much evidence of this now. So it wasn't just the cynicism and the, sort of the dark nature of the Chinese releasing this virus and lying about it. It was also people within the U.S. who were complicit in developing that virus in the Wuhan lab, right? There's, and then on top of that, there's those in the U.S. and all over the world who are complicit in bringing a treatment, a vaccine that wasn't a vaccine, that didn't stop the virus from spreading, and then on top of that, approved a treatment like remdesivir that they knew would mimic the progression of the virus and kill people. I mean, so there's layer upon layer upon layer, and on that one, I have to say the CCP had help. They didn't act alone.
Yeah, I would say the most disturbing part is that in academics and in the medical science, discussion and discourse and exchange is the soul of medicine. You share with others. All these doctors are educated and intelligent, smart. They have an idea. Hey, how about ivermectin? There was no discussion. There was censorship. There was censorship in the medical profession, in the medical community. I don't know where this censorship started, but there was censorship, and that is not right. So what I would have preferred is that there is those who say, "Hey, I think ivermectin works." That they say, "Okay, you do an experiment. You have 50 patients and 50 control people, and then after a month or so, we look at it." That would be scientific, the scientific approach.
And normal.
That's what we did for decades, for centuries. Having an open conversation, not censorship. The same censorship happens with forced organ harvesting on China. I don't know why transplant doctors are not asking the question, how can China produce so many transplantations? They don't have or didn't have an organ donation program. We need proper, uncensored scientific discussions as we had for decades and centuries.
Well, it doesn't help when China owns a lot of the medical publications, right?
Well, definitely.
Yeah, because that's another thing that the Chinese have been very sophisticated about doing is they've taken over these publications and they make sure.
There's no excuse for that.
No, it's not an excuse. It's the mechanics of how they make sure that it happens.
In the time of social media, where doctors are just like 10 seconds away from a message, where doctors can connect with thousands and tens of thousands of doctors, where was the voice that said we need an open, uncensored discussion on this topic to find the best approach?
A voice like yours, because you're a doctor.
Yes.
And tell me how you went, from practicing medicine to really devoting, I think, at least 2 decades of your life to exposing this issue.
Yeah, that goes back to the beginning. In 2006, I heard about it. I thought it's unbelievable, but maybe it's true. I have to look into it. And then I did my own research over 4 or 5 months. And then at a ad hoc press conference at the World Transplant Congress in Boston in 2006, I was asked to speak at a press conference. And then afterwards, I thought, wow, I'm just one voice, one person. What can I do? I'm nobody in the medical field. What can I do? And then I thought, but I need to do something. Mm-hmm. And if I don't do it, then nobody is doing it, because nobody has the time. No doctor has the time next to the patient work to work on this. Mm. And then I had the thought, okay, I need to start an NGO. I need to start an NGO to bring doctors together and to inform doctors. I need to amplify my voice. and you never underestimate what one single person, one individual can do in the world.
Well, that's right.
And it happened. It started 18 years ago, and then during these past years, we had done a lot of things. For example, we run a global petition. We collected 3 million signatures. That petition was addressed to the United Nations Human Rights Council, and they didn't do anything.
I'm shocked.
But
That's sarcasm.
But it tells you about the interest of so many people.
It does.
And then we were nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize 3 times. In 2019, we received the Mother Teresa Award. So if you think about it, it started with one voice. But if you have something to say, it can amplify. Never underestimate what you and every audience member can do.
Especially with the power of truth.
Yes.
Right? That's why it grows, because it's truth rising.
Yes.
Let me ask you, you said, when I heard about this, how did you hear about it and what did you hear?
I read an article in the Epoch Times in, I think, February 2006. There was a journalist who said, well, I investigated the hospital in Sujatun, and they are harvesting organs from Falun Gong practitioners. A week later, the wife of a surgeon came to the public, or had an interview with the Epoch Times, and she said, my husband confessed to me that he took 2,000 corneas from Falun Gong practitioners. And there were even more Falun Gong practitioners in that hospital. And then at the end of the month, a military veteran doctor sent 2 letters to the Epoch Times and said, I can confirm what these 2 people said. I've seen these concentration camps. There are at least 36 of these underground concentration camps with Falun Gong practitioners.
36.
Yeah, some hold like 50,000 people, 50,000 Falun Gong practitioners. And he said he saw the so-called consent forms, and there were tens of thousands, and they all had the same signature. So that was just I think it was March 2006. In 1 month, I read these articles, and then I said, wow, none of these people were Falun Gong practitioners, but all of them were saying the main target of forced organ harvesting is Falun Gong practitioners. So you see, there's like a third-party voice here who advocates. They were advocating for a group of people that they were not part of it. So I thought, wow, there's, that is an aspect that's consolidate that there's some truth to it.
When they do these removals, right? When they do the surgery to take the organs out, do they sedate patients? I mean, are they at least unconscious?
What I hear is that at least not all. I don't know if some are sedated. I don't know. We don't have that information. But what I hear is that there were some people who just they received like substances that paralyze the muscles so that they cannot move.
Oh my gosh!
I guess it's also part of depends on the doctor who is doing it. If they are completely ruthless, or if they still have some good sides,
if they have any humanity in them.
Yeah. But it's very difficult to get these details. Those details are more like random and maybe anecdotal.
Anecdotal as opposed to scientific.
We have not enough reports about it. We just heard like how they do that. But we can say, for example, that we interviewed like thousands of Falun Gong practitioners, and they say they were blood tested. So that's where we can say, okay, this is something that is not an anecdote anymore.
Yes.
So sometimes it's like we are trying to understand it, and then other parts we already have an understanding about it.
You already have the data. And what's been the response of the Chinese Communist Party and the leadership? How have they reacted to this, you exposing this?
of course, they don't respond too loud to it because they want to avoid. You have to think about it. Their goal is to have it to silence this topic. That's why they bribe Western media not to report about it. Silence. So if they would start an argument with us, that actually would take it to
would shine a light on it.
Yes, and they would actually defeat the purpose of silencing. So they actually don't respond to us.
For you as a doctor, is there a part of this that is especially difficult?
Of course. Otherwise, I wouldn't have started the work with the NGO. But I cannot every day go through the process to reimagine it. That it wouldn't be. I couldn't bear that pressure. So I in a way, I rationalize the information and just keep going to inform. But here and there, when I go into go through the process, what is happening is heart-wrenching.
Yes. What can you tell us about what you've learned to help people really understand the true nature of this?
Yeah, that's a big issue about understanding what is actually happening. And there was an incident where I actually learned myself how to describe it. So for example, when students learn medicine, it's basically they just learn the textbooks. It's textbook knowledge.
Sure.
They don't have like the real life experience. So I learned about surgery and other subjects and medicine, internal medicine, etc. At one point, students have to go through short practical or internship in the surgical field. So I was doing that, and I had a few days, went with the chief surgeon into the operating room and did my part to hold the instruments. And then there was a very simple surgery, an appendectomy to remove the appendix. And it started with a little cut, just like this, little cut. And at that moment, I started to think and say, "Oh my goodness, he is actually cutting this person over, cut the skin." And I started to think. At that moment, it took just 5 more seconds or so, and I started to faint. So the chief surgeon, he already noticed that, and he called the anesthetist to hold him. He's about to collapse, and they put me on the ground. And the next day, he told me that happens to many.
Wow, the first time that you see it.
That not the first time I've seen it before. It's just that the first time I was thinking about it.
I see.
And he said that happens to many, and he said it only happens once. Because what happened at that moment, I shifted from textbook knowledge to real life knowledge. And there was this fainting, this visceral experience in between. So if people can talk about forced organ harvesting and don't have this visceral gut-wrenching experience of, whoa, this total disgust, they are still on the textbook knowledge. But if they go...
in the academic phase, like just looking at it without emotion.
Yes, but I've seen it many times in the phase when I talked about it. When I talk about it, and I see the other person, changing his face. I know, okay, now he understood.
And I see.
And now he really understood, not textbook knowledge, but real life knowledge. And starting from that moment onwards, all these people who had this gut-wrenching experience, realizing that people are killed on the operating table to harvest the rib of their organ, if they understand, they become supporters who never change.
They never leave you. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Once you see that, it's so awful.
They all of them become supporters of it and try to do their whatever they can do to help.
Sure.
There's like a point of no return. If you're on the textbook knowledge, you can always walk out. But once you go through this realization, then you never go back to ignoring that.
It's interesting, that process that you describe, because as a young girl, I wanted to be a veterinarian, and I went to work for a veterinarian during my school vacation, and she was, on my first day, she was going to spade a cat. And so she put the cat out, and she had me shave the area, and then she handed me the scalpel, and she said, "Cut here." Ooh, I had exactly the same thing. Same thing. I was like, yeah, no. No, I'm not built for the life of a doctor. I'm not doing that. And honestly, that queasy feeling just did not leave me. And I don't even remember, because I think I'm so traumatized. Mm-hmm. I've kind of blocked that part of my brain where I think about actually taking that scalpel and slicing the skin. And I remember seeing it, because you have to separate those organs, right, to remove them. But afterwards, she gave me the bloody instruments to wash. And I was standing there washing them and looking at the blood, and I just sunk to the floor. That was it. It was, I was done. That was it. My veterinary career was over at that point. I was 12 years old. So at least I had some clarity. But I can't even begin to imagine what happens to a person, a doctor, who is over and over again removing these organs from people, knowing that they're going to die, knowing that they're creating harm. Imagine doing that for money. How you could even spend that money and not.
So what I heard from some witness testimonies is that at the beginning they were doing it for money, but then after some time those doctors started to have nightmares.
I see.
And that is also what happened to the doctor of the wife who came to public. He had nightmares, so he confessed to. She asked, "What is happening?" And he confessed to her what he did.
Couldn't live with himself.
Yes. So at one point, those doctors cannot
continue like that.
Cannot
right?
continue. They cannot live anymore, and that's when sometimes you hear that doctors are falling off a window of a Chinese hospital from the fifth floor, or other things happened. That's probably when somebody either wanted to go to public to talk about it, or he couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah, they either got a little help leaping off that building, or they took their own life. Are there any statistics for that you know of? Any way to track that? No.
Somebody is trying to track it in newspapers, but I don't have any records.
So, I mean, look, the CCP does whatever they want. I mean, the United States is supposed to stand for human rights and and freedom and all the rest of it, and yet the China was allowed back in the World Trade Organization. And the U.S. spent the world really spent the next few decades literally selling their souls, their national security, their soul, their everything out to China. And now, of course, they have extraordinary economic power, which is manifesting in the trade wars, or the tariff wars right now, and many other things that people are not even talking about. And I just wonder, what is your objective? What are you hoping will happen?
So the first simple step, and everyone can help, it's not relying on governments or bills or laws or whatever. What everyone can help is to break the silence. Just talk about it. Talk about the forced organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners in China on social media, in op-eds or letters to newspapers, to your friends and colleagues. You never know whom you reach, and maybe there's a journalist and then he gets interested and write about it. Just talk about it, break through the silence. That is the first step, because this whole practice is so gruesome. Once people know about it, there's no way back. You need to have this crack in the wall. Then the water will do the rest. The conscience will do the rest. The compassion and empathy of the people will do the rest. So that's the first step. Everyone can help, and the Chinese government cannot control it, cannot bribe it, cannot silence governments through business contracts. The individual has a total power to take down the CCP just by speaking up and breaking the silence. So that's one step. The other steps are, of course, to inform our representatives and to ask for implementing bills and laws. That is a procedure that takes time, but actually currently there are these hot discussions about the tariffs. And many people don't understand it or are not agreeing with President Trump on the tariffs. But actually, tariffs have the fastest impact on China, because you already hear after a few weeks that certain companies, factories are laying off their workers because there's no business. The container ships are not leaving ports in China anymore because there are no orders from overseas because of the tariffs. So now the CCP is within weeks, is at a breaking point. So this is the language that they understand, because if the workers don't have a job, then the CCP is afraid that there will be revolts from the workers, from the people, and they cannot control that.
Well, the CCP rules by fear.
Yes.
Right? And power and control.
Yes.
So they're hanging on by a thread anyway.
Yes.
Right? Because one of the reasons they don't want to take their eye off what's happening at home is because they don't have the loyalty and love of their people.
No.
That line between control and loss of control in China is quite thin, isn't it?
Yes, very thin. And the tariffs are actually right on that point. We thought of well, you mentioned earlier the Chinese economy is so strong. Actually, that's a deception.
It's not that strong.
It's not that strong because they depend so much on export, but because of the currency manipulation and the low pay to the workers, it is what I call like a reverse tariff. Instead of taking the tariffs from abroad, they just offer the product so cheap, which has the same effect like a tariff.
Yes.
It's a discrepancy in the pricing. So now, with the tariffs that we have on China, that discrepancy is taken out of the equation. And basically right now the Chinese economy is fragile. Because if it cannot export and if this forced labor and currency manipulation does not work anymore on the economy, they lose the money.
And when you censor people and punish them, I mean, with the social credit score that China has, where people have no rights and no freedoms, and if they don't like what you said about the CCP, which they pick up on surveillance because they surveil the people everywhere, facial and voice recognition technology all over the place, then they can, they can stop you from traveling, they can stop you from working, they can deny you access to anything they want. So once you strip people of all of that, what do you have? People with nothing to lose.
Exactly.
And that's the thing they fear the most.
Exactly. The people could become free. That's what the CCP does not want. They want to control them. So now the problem is that the tariffs are unpopular. And because
you mean in the US?
In the US, because it's a technical term and it's abstract and
people don't get it.
And then people might say, well, tariffs, yes and no, but I want to buy my coffee maker for $20, not for $40.
Well,
so it is the immediate benefit
to the individual, even though that coffee maker is going to break in about 6 months.
that makes the tariffs so unpopular. Why is that? The soul of in this procedure in the tariffs is missing. There's no soul in it. Nothing touches the people. There's nothing emotional that the people can relate to. if you at this moment make the forced organ harvesting that is taking place in China on industrial scale public, and all Americans would know about
that
it,
that's what China is doing.
then I think a large amount of people would not want to buy anymore from China and say, "You keep your product. I don't want to. I don't want to feed into this forced organ harvesting."
Yeah.
At that time, they might actually agree to the tariffs and say, "I cannot."
They might. You're optimistic, Torsten.
So that,
I think you're optimistic.
That's where the part is, where the information relates to the people, to their soul.
Of course, and moves them.
So I'm just saying that this is right now a historic, small historic window when you attach the forced organ harvesting that the CCP is conducting for 25 years. If you attach this to the tariffs, you actually attach meaning to the tariffs and a purpose to the tariffs.
Yes.
It's not just about money, but also about not tolerating anymore this
evil.
gruesome, evil practice in China. When we do business with China, we send out the signal, it's okay, you can kill people for organs. Yeah,
right.
We agree.
Right. It's
involuntarily we give our agreement to it, and that's why they continue. And then just and broaden it and add more and more vicious practices like Covert or fentanyl to the practice.
Yes.
But now is the time when we could actually let the people know this is the evil nature of the CCP. They started 25 years ago to kill Falun Gong practitioners just for being a good person, to cultivate in these good principles. They were persecuting and killing these people, and now, we watched it. We didn't do anything, not enough. Now it's knocking at our doors. COVID, fentanyl, and the subversion of our medical community.
Well, I often say that the Arabs have a saying, which is that if you let a snake into your garden, it always finds its way into your house. Mm-hmm. And in some respects, you could say that the CCP snake is in the house.
Yes.
But, when you talk about the tariffs, I just saw a headline, I think it was on Bloomberg or Washington Post, about how, people are not, about a guy who wasn't going to buy his new Porsche because of what it was going to cost, which is just extraordinary when you think about the fact that, fertilizer that you need to farm and to grow for your food supply is most of it comes from China. Your gunpowder is not made in the United States anymore. Your commercial ships, your containers, your construction materials, your chemicals, your medicines.
90% of our medical drugs are made in China.
Yeah, and now increasingly in India, but nevertheless not here in the United States. And so you start to look at it, and you listen to these people on television, and you're like, what is wrong with you? You're sitting here making an economic argument, and you're talking about how many, companies are going to go out of business. Like, do you realize that the United States is in severe danger of not being able to survive at all if you don't address these very urgent national security issues? And do you want to see people die en masse because they don't have access to their life-saving drugs?
Yes.
Let me ask you about something as just for you personally, what it's been like on this long journey of yours to expose this. How would you describe to people, what has kept you motivated and driven you forward, and what do you know that we don't know?
Well, when I studied medicine, I started it to help people, to save people's lives. And usually if you have your clinic, then you see maybe 2,000 patients per year and can save their lives, improve their lives. So I sacrificed that part, but I told myself, if I'm able to stop this horrific practice of forced organ harvesting, I can maybe help hundreds and millions of people to save their life. So this is what keeps me running. I want to end this practice. I want to stop it. And this has no place in the 21st century and has no place in our medical profession. I do all this work pro bono, and that's okay. My reward is when sometimes a person, a doctor, whoever comes to me and say, "Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for what you're doing.
For exposing this.
For exposing this. I've learned so much. Keep on doing this." And that is so much worth. It's like gold, a heart of gold. If you want to say,
it gives you strength.
Say it this way, it encourages me, and then I can continue. On the other side, what was most heart-wrenching for me is actually not what happens in China. What the Chinese officials do. By censoring us or going around and deceiving. No, what was most disappointing for me is seeing Western doctors who live in this free world are not willing to look into it or are openly working for the CCP by defending this practice or sabotaging our work. In one case, we had a presentation at Harvard University, and 50 doctors signed up to come to our presentations as per RSVP. At the end, no doctor showed up.
Wow.
And we were surprised. Why not? What happened? So one doctor who was on the panel, who was a professor at Harvard, he then told us he received an email from a colleague, from another professor, and he was spreading poison about us.
Wow.
Saying, don't go to that event. Those moments where it comes from the colleagues, from medical doctors in the free world, who are not even willing to look into it. If they criticize our work, I'm fine with that. That's no problem. But if they frame it and not even want to look into it, that is really disappointing. Really disappointing.
It's very disappointing, and it also just shows you again with these institutions that have come to carry so much weight and have so much regard and respect historically within our society, and yet there they are again. And I bet if you followed the money, you'd find out why people are so willing, right, to speak up against you and not in favor of you.
Yes. There's another incident where we tried to work with the American Medical Association. We found a state medical society from DC who listened to that society listened to our presentation. After half hour, they agreed we need to do something. So they approached the American Medical Association and wanted to bring in a resolution, and the resolution was rejected. Then we have one doctor who knew how the machinery works, so he said, "Oh, I have another idea." He submitted it on a different way. And then it were actually the transplant doctors who opposed our resolution. It came from the transplant community.
And what did the resolution really call for?
And to create a report about forced organ harvesting, and made the report available to all members of the American Medical Association.
That's it.
But the transplant doctors and the leadership didn't want to do it. Then our doctor found another way, and he brought in the same resolution in the House of Delegates, where all the ordinary doctors were. Not the leaders, not the transplant doctors, but just
the ordinary doctors.
The common doctors.
The people.
The people. And the House of Delegates voted in favor for our resolution. So the American Medical Association was then basically forced to come up with a report. That was, this just illustrates that doctors, the people, they are very interested in this and willing to listen. But it's the leadership and selected groups who want to put like a veil on it and etc. But to finish up, the report that the American Medical Association then published, they assigned a doctor to do that, was 6 pages long.
Wow.
And there are book-filling information and pieces of evidence. It would...
you could fill books with it. It's so much.
A report of 50 pages would be adequate, not six pages. And the report was just on the surface. So
they minimized it and whitewashed it.
Yeah. So there are, even if you go to medical journals, there are at least 20 articles that are peer-reviewed, published in medical journals on this topic. Just 20 articles. How can you only have 6 pages and not even include these 20 articles and summarize from these peer-reviewed? It would still be in the medical academic field, but even that was not done. So it was basically just a hoax.
Wow.
So you have the American Medical Association, the American Transplant Congress. You cannot say this is just a single case. There is something going on where China has an influence on our leadership in the medical field. And then you add COVID to it, and how the medical field did not discuss the options, how to respond to COVID. And then it becomes very concerning.
Well, yes. And, when it just exists in the transplant community, it doesn't reach most Americans. But with COVID, that affected everyone. And so that really brought these issues into the spotlight.
Yeah.
And we're still waiting for accountability for that.
Yeah.
Tell me about your methods. Like, how do you know what you know? What is it based on? And I know you interview survivors and family members and so on, but just give me a sense of how you get to your data and information.
The different groups that are looking into this issue and investigate have different approaches. So what we do is we look into witness reports, we interview people, we take the official data that the Chinese government makes available and then find actually the lie in it by analyzing. Then there are other groups who screen through medical articles that were published from China. One was, for example, saying they took organs from brain donors, but then the team found out that actually the people were not assessed as brain death because they actually did not perform the proper procedure. So in that case, they analyzed what the medical articles were saying and found a gap. In another case, we observed the donor numbers and saw that the donor numbers in China, because after 2015 they have a so-called organ donation program. So the increase was very slow, gradual, and then on December 30, end of the year, it jumped by 25,000. Exactly 25,000, 000, 25,000.
How can that happen?
The donation numbers supposed to be real people. How can on one day 25,000 people sign up? It's ridiculous.
Not possible.
Not possible. Then it has a jump. And then the following year, also in December, 88,000 people were added to the donor program. So we collected the data because the data is public. And then we asked or worked with a forensic statistician to analyze it. And he found that the numbers are too good to be real.
What do you mean?
It followed a perfect equation. It followed a perfect mathematical equation. And that is not reflecting real life.
Yeah.
So he said that those numbers were manufactured.
Of course, yeah, that's what it means.
So this is what we do. We take the numbers that are public and we find the lie. In one case, for example, China said in 2024 that they had so many donors from their organ donor pool. And then I compared it with other countries. And what you can change a lot of things, but the death rate is usually very steady. So in all countries, the death rate was maybe 1,000 per 100,000 or 900 per 100,000. So that's a steady component, a steady factor. So then we took the population from the organ donor pools and said, okay, if America has 170 million registered organ donors, and 1,000 out of 100,000 die, that means out of this pool of registered organ donors, 1,700,000 will die in 1 year. So then you can and then you compare it with the actual number of organ donors, and say, okay, about 1% of the registered organ donors pass away and become organ donors. 1% of the registered organ donors pass away and become actual organ donor. Yeah.
Wow, that's not very much.
It's not very much. And we did this for US, for the UK, for Denmark, just random countries. And it was always like 1% of the registered organ donors pass away and become organ donors. In China, it's 12%.
That's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. It's so obviously not true.
It's obviously not true. And this is how we and if they said they had in 2024 they had 55,000. Well, the death rate would suggest that 55,000 donors pass away, but they had 6,000 donors. So that's the 12%. So then we did reverse engineering and said, okay, let's apply 1% as in other countries on those 55,000 who passed away. Then China should have only 550 donors per year. So they said they had 6,500, but they should have only 500 donors. So there's a discrepancy of 6,000 people, 6,000 donors. And that tells you, well, where do those 6,000 come from?
That is a lot of people.
Maybe outside of the registered organ donor pool. Maybe from prisoners of detention camps and prisons.
Sure.
So, you see, we find where the gap is, where the lie is, and then we can get an idea of what China reports and what it hides.
And do you go to China? I mean, you personally?
No.
Is it too dangerous for you?
Yes.
You absolutely will not survive that.
No.
And I know that's why you don't want to talk much about your family or anything like that.
Yes. No. What China is doing is, in a way, unpredictable. You never know what they do, and you don't know what they do themselves, and where they ask proxies to do something.
Proxies like the Mexican cartels.
They can hire somebody. It may look like something else.
Sure, like a break-in.
I got, for example, when I started in the early years, I got phone calls from the Chinese embassy on my voicemail. Like 20 times they called me. And I got a translation. You should come to the Chinese embassy. There's a package for you.
Obviously, you never went.
I didn't go. No, I thought I don't know what type of package. No.
So where were you born?
In Germany, in West Germany, in Bremen.
What was it like?
Just like a healthy society.
Well, but was it sort of, city or rural?
It's a city.
It's a
small city, but a city, yeah.
And your parents were kind of ordinary?
Yes, they don't have any relation to the medical field.
At all. And are they still around? You rather not say. That's fine. I don't want to put anybody at risk. But it's quite a journey that you made from what a small city in West Germany all the way around the world.
Yes, true. You never know where your life leads you to, and you never know what one individual can do to change the world.
This is very true. And Torsten, I hope that when people listen to this, that they will be inspired to look up your organization. I'm going to say it again. It's Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting. So how do you say the acronym? Is that DOFA?
It's DAFOH. The website is dafoh.org. Oftentimes we just call it DAFO. DAFO as a word, yeah.
Well, and I hopefully you'll get the Nobel Peace Prize. I'm not sure what it's worth anymore after they keep giving it away to people that don't deserve it and cheapening the prize. But to have your work recognized in that way is very significant.
Yes.
Especially in this field that there's so much against you, so much suppression.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. For example, you mentioned the Nobel Peace Prize. I wouldn't be so much interested in the actual award, but I would be thankful for the award because it would just help me to amplify the message, to bring it to more people.
You could reach more people that way.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you offer me the Nobel Peace Prize or a contract with a media company that would help me to spread it all over the world, I would choose the media company.
Sure. Well, let's hope that we can help you a little bit in that, in getting the word out by talking to you today about this. And I know people can follow you through your website, but are you on social media too?
We also have a presence on Twitter, on X.
On X.
Yeah.
How do they find you there?
It's MDS against FOH.
MDS against FOH.
Yes.
You don't make it too easy, Torsten. I'm sure that if people want to donate or help spread the word, whatever it is that they feel moved to do, that will make a big difference in your life and in your work, right?
Yeah.
Right now, how many people are incarcerated? How many members of Falun Gong and how many others are incarcerated in China?
There are estimates that at any time 500,000 to 1 million Falun Gong practitioners are detained.
And how many people are having their organs harvested in China every day?
Well, we did, based on the official data that we have and doing some math, we came to the observation that every half hour one person is being killed for their organs.
In China alone?
In China, yeah.
And does this include children?
In some cases, yeah. There was a recent case where a very famous singer from Taiwan received an organ transplant, a liver and a lung, and it was said that those were coming from an infant. But I don't know if who that infant was. That I don't know. But there can be these situations.
It's extraordinary that this kind of evil exists, but it does. It's a reality, and we don't have to accept it.
No,
we can actually do something about it. You've been doing something about it for a very long time, at great personal risk and sacrifice. Incredible to think every half hour this is happening. This isn't just happening in China, it's also happening in India. Mm-hmm. And in fact, what I heard just recently is that in India, they're more concerned with parasites. And so they really want American organ donors because there's often fewer parasites. Mm-hmm. But you say what's happening in India is more like organ trafficking than forced harvesting? There
is a history of organ trafficking in India, but now with a growing conscience, there are also measures to stop that. So I believe that it doesn't have like a big platform to thrive as a organ trafficking,
because it's not sort of part built into the structure of the leadership of the state.
Exactly, and
Right.
and the government can take measures to stop it or can investigate it, and etc.
So, well, that was something I learned about you. That's very interesting. I will let you go. This is an incredibly heavy topic, but an important one. We're very proud to do our part in that. Proud is maybe the wrong word. We just feel very strongly that we have a responsibility and a duty to do that.
Yes.
So, for anyone who is interested, that is again Torsten Trey, Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting, or DOFA. You can find him on X. What is it again on X?
MDS against FOH.
MDS Against FOH. MDS Against FOH. Please like, share, subscribe this episode. You can go to laralogan.com. Support independent journalism. Support what we're doing. Get the word out. And thank you so much for being willing to go rogue.